How are you doing today? Hey, before we even jump into the devotional today, I want to ask you a question. Who is the least likely person to become a Christian in your life? I mean, I want someone who you know, someone that, you could give me a name. Who is the least likely to become a Christian? Or here's another question. Who is the least likely person to become a minister? If you think about what ministers do and the calling of being a vocational minister, even though, very frankly, all Christians are called to be ministers, but a person who's called to be a preacher, teacher, who would be the least likely person? We are in Acts chapter 9, as we have been going through Acts a chapter at a time in our reading plan right now. We had spent 5 days just focusing on Acts chapter 1 in our first reading plan, and here we are in our second reading plan. We've been working very hard to establish a time in our day, a routine in which we read the Bible, we meditate, and we take time to pray, and we're asking God to take advantage of the disruption in our life to create a new pattern so that we can be individuals who are used by Him in the new reality that is coming our way, whatever that may be. And the book of Acts is the perfect place to be for that, by the way, because the church in the book of Acts, as the church begins, it has to be nimble. Things change. There's times of tremendous growth. There's times of tremendous adversity. Nothing is for sure. I mean, it's just an amazing time. There's persecution. There's all sorts of things going on there that I think, man, it's just the perfect place for us to be right now. And we're sort of at a transition as we get into chapter 9, in that so far, chapters 1 through 8, we've been talking in terms of time, we've been talking about days, weeks, and months. I mean, everything that happened there in Acts 1 through Acts 8 happened in a rather short amount of time. And now we're switching into a different mode in which really decades are going to pass over the next 20 chapters here. And lots of different things are going to be happening, and there'll be time gaps, and there's lots of other things that I could note about this transition. But the question that I have for you is, who in your life would be the least likely to be a believer, the least likely to be a preacher, the least likely to be a missionary? If you've been reading along with us, you know that we've been introduced to a guy named Saul, and he would fit that category of the least likely. He is the one who stood there by Stephen's stoning, condoning it, sort of like giving his blessing. We're not exactly sure of what it means when it says that he stood over their coats or that he watched their coats. There's a suggestion that it means that he not only approved, but he was in some ways organizing it or something. But he becomes, after that, his persecution breaks out against the church, and this is a persecution that is coming from those who are Israelites, those who are following the Jewish religion, who believe that the followers of Jesus, or as they're referred to in chapter 9, those of the way, because Jesus is the way, the truth, and the light, those who are following Jesus are of a sect. I mean, that's what they believe, and so they're trying to stomp out the sect. Now, as we saw yesterday, the real persecution of the church, the severe persecution of the church, doesn't start until right around 67 AD. So that would have been like 30 years after this. And so he is the one, Saul is the one, who organizes the persecution of the church. And it's interesting what's noted there. He begins to jail both men and women, something that was really unheard of. But in the church, remember that in the church there's neither male nor female. And Peter had explained from the prophet Joel in Acts chapter 2, at Pentecost, that women were going to be preaching too. And so men and women are preaching, declaring the truth, and he is jailing them. And as he does that, those who were in Jerusalem flee. Everyone but the apostles flee the city. And some of them go to other regions. Some of them end up in a town called Damascus, which is in modern day Syria and was a part of Decapolis, a state that was separate from Jerusalem. And so they became refugees in Damascus, some of the followers of Jesus. But here's the thing, people who study history have actually found the extradition agreement that was signed between the states in that region. They were all under the Roman Empire, but they were all like their mini nation. You know, they still referred to themselves as the nation of Israel. But they had agreements, and those agreements read something like this. I'm not going to take the time to read it right out of the history book to you, but basically it says this: if someone in one country is a cause of tremendous problem, and as you begin to try to arrest them, if they flee to one of the other countries, if you'll bring papers, you can go into the other country and arrest them and extradite them, bring them back. And so this is something that is done publicly, and this is what Saul does. He's going after the men and women who are declaring the truth of the gospel. He gets extradition papers, and he heads to Damascus, and that's where we read the conversion story. Because you see, with God, it's simply, God does not have a list of people that are the least likely. The only list that God has, other than those who are in the Lamb's Book of Life, is a list of people that he loves, and it's a list that includes everybody. Everybody. He doesn't give up on anybody. You know, if you just stumbled across this video, by the way, you haven't maybe you haven't even been reading along with us or anything, and you're like, okay, what's this crazy guy talking about? Here's what I do want you to know. It doesn't matter where you've been. It don't matter what you've done. I mean, Jesus is madly in love with you and has a plan for you and wants to change your life completely. And here Saul is, who has heard a beautiful presentation of the gospel in Stephen, has seen Stephen look into heaven, has seen his face glow as he dies. And now he confronts Jesus in a vision. And it's a beautiful story. It's a story we're going to hear again, because once Saul becomes Paul and he is brought before the kings and leaders of his modern time, he tells this story over and over again. But there are some people in here that I want you to see. And by the way, just as a sidelight, like if I was preaching about this, I would say, hey, you need to be able to share your testimony. You should be able to tell folks how you came to Jesus. But I just want to point out two people to you. The first one is Ananias. As you read that story, think about Ananias. He knows that Saul is coming to persecute the church, and then God tells him, rather than hiding from him, rather than hiding from Saul, go to him and pray. And he does it. Does he have a conversation with God? Yeah, he does. But he does it. And then Barnabas, when Saul, after he's been in Damascus with the believers for a little bit, he works his way back to Jerusalem, and he is not accepted by the church. They are afraid of him. They think he's faking it. But Barnabas, remember Barnabas, the one who has the nickname Barnabas because he's a son of encouragement, the one who cares so deeply about people that he sold property in order to give to the poor? That Barnabas reaches out to Saul and brings him into the church at Jerusalem. You know, my thought, there's plenty of other things in this passage that we could talk about, but my thought today as we just begin to wrap this up here, my thought has to do, what do we know about God? Well, what we know about God is that he loves everyone. We learn that about God from this passage. He can turn anybody around. What do we learn about ourselves? Well, I think what we see in human nature there is that there are very few people who are as generous with grace as God is. There are a lot of people who don't get it when people turn around. They don't believe it. And what is God calling me to do? It may be that God is calling you to begin to pray for, to begin to love on, to begin to really pray for those people in your life that you would put on the least likely list. And I feel really prompted to say what I'm going to say next. In fact, I'll just be really transparent. This is my second time through this devotional because when I was done, I felt I needed to say this and should have said it. I have no idea who watches these videos. I really don't. We can't track that. We don't know. But I just get a very profound sense that there's at least one person, but there are people who are watching this who, if you were to write that list, who's the least likely person to be a follower of Jesus, or who is, and I feel really strongly about this, who is the least likely person to become a preacher, teacher, evangelist type person, you would put your name at the top of that list. And I just want you to know that I sense God saying to you, you know, I have a plan for you. I had a plan for you when I knit you together in my mother's womb. And I have not given up on you. I mean, if God did not give up on Saul, who actively participated in the martyrdom of Stephen, if God did not give up on him, he has not given up on you. He has called you. He has chosen you to be his child, to be a minister, to follow him. And so as you go back, maybe as God is speaking to you, you go back and you read Acts chapter 9. Allow God to speak to you. What does this passage tell us about God? What does this passage tell us about ourselves? What is this passage calling us to do? We'll see you tomorrow, folks, when we read Acts chapter 10. When I push stop here, I'm just going to say a prayer that whoever watches this video, whoever this video is for, that you would sense it in a profound way and that your answer would be yes. You guys have a blessed rest of the day.